Hey YouTube, and welcome back to our channel. Now on today's video we're actually going to talk about a topic that we actually talked about in one of our last videos, and it's actually the Nahanni Valley. Now we touched base on this a little bit in our top 10 most haunted places in Canada video, but when I was doing research on this I found it to be super interesting. It just seemed very strange, and there was definitely not a lot of people going up there because of how remote this location is. So it really did strike me as a very mysterious location, and not to mention there's a lot of people that go missing here, and that also reminded me of the missing 411 phenomenon. So I wanted to do a little bit more of a thorough video on this and just go over a few of the interesting cases that have taken place here, and kind of just start a conversation to see what you guys think could be happening up in this region. Now, before we get into today's video, just want to send a quick reminder to please consider subscribing if you guys enjoy this type of content. We post 2 to 3 times a week, and I'm sure, as you know by now, we like talking about the paranormal, unsolved mysteries, and a little bit of true crime. So the Nahanni Valley is actually located in the Northwest Territories. Now, if you don't know where that is, it's actually up in northern Canada. It's in a super remote area. There's not a lot going up there except for nature, and it actually remains one of the most remote, unexplored areas in Canada, if not the world, really. And one of the only ways to get there is not by road. You can't actually drive up there. You have to either go by plane or by boat, which also adds to the reasons why this place is so unresearched and is still a very big mystery. Now, to get a little bit of background on the region and where the actual name comes from, the Nahanni Valley actually comes from the native indigenous language of the Dene people, and Nahanni Valley actually refers to the land of the Naha. We'll get into a little bit more about the former Naha people, but there's a lot of stories that have been passed down by the indigenous population living there. They talk a lot about mythical creatures. There's a lot of beautiful areas, even a hidden oasis that people haven't located yet. But there's definitely a lot of stories that have been passed down from generation to generation here, which adds to the level of mystery. So like I mentioned earlier, this is a hot spot for a lot of people going missing, and it actually has earned the nickname the Valley of the Headless, or the Headless Creek. And the name is not unwarranted. It actually does come from a few of the missing people that were eventually found. And the most intriguing stories that have been recorded and passed down started in 1904 with the McLeod Brothers. Now, during this time, the McLeod brothers were hearing a lot about gold mining up in the north, and they were becoming very intrigued because they were hearing a lot of success stories. A lot of people were striking it rich up there, so they wanted to try out their luck. And so in 1904 they set up for the Nahanni Valley, and they actually did get there successfully, and they did actually manage to find a decent amount of gold. They actually came back with approximately 40 ounces of gold, which was enough to excite them about going back the following year. So in 1905, they decided to test out their luck again and head back up north to the Nahanni Valley, except this time they wouldn't come back. It wasn't until 1908 when their brother, Charlie McLeod, decided to go looking for them up in the north, and he actually was the one that found their remains. Now, this is the creepy part. He actually found their skeletal remains because it had been over 3 years since the brothers had gone missing. So what was left with them was basically just skeletal remains. But the interesting part here is that their skulls were missing. They were no longer connected to their bodies. And the way their bodies were placed was very odd. It almost seemed like either someone placed them in a certain position or they actually died instantly in that position. That's up for debate. People don't really know what actually happened to them. Their arms were placed in a certain position where it seemed like they were protecting themselves from an ambush. So it's not really known what happened here, if they were attacked by wild animals or if they were attacked by other people. some people seem to believe that there's some paranormal phenomenon going on here as well. In 1917, the valley took its next victim, a man called Martin Jorgensen. He had also gone up there looking for gold, and when he actually was successful in finding gold, he ended up sending back a message telling people about his findings. Eventually, when his message reached back to where he was from, a lot of people got excited about this and they decided to go up and look for gold as well. Unfortunately, they didn't find Martin. All they found was his cabin, and I know they said they didn't find him, but they did find his skeletal remains, except this time he was also missing his skull, and there was really no explanation or any sort of theory really as to what happened to him. And this is really just the beginning of the long list of people that have gone missing. If I would make a whole video on the people missing in this area, it would literally be like 2-3 hours long. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of a rundown of a few people that went missing and the mysterious circumstances that surround them. In 1931, Phil Power's cabin was actually found burnt down to the ground. Now, when investigators tried to determine what caused the fire, they couldn't really figure out what it was. There were some theories that maybe the oven had caught fire to the rest of the house, but this wasn't making a lot of sense because of the placement of the oven. It wouldn't have made sense for it to catch on fire to the wall because it was too far away from it apparently. It didn't make a lot of sense, and unfortunately Phil's body was actually never found. Then there's the Yukon fisher whose body was actually found very, very close, almost right next to the location where the McLeod brothers have been found. There was no way to determine what happened to his body. They weren't able to figure out how he died. This next one creeped me out a little bit just because it just gave me chills. It's about a woman called Laferret, and this happened in 1936. So on that day, she was actually out with a group of hunters and they were out in the area, and somehow she actually ended up getting separated from the group. When the people that she was with went looking for her, they absolutely could not find any trace of her, so they were kind of forced to abandon their search. And because the area was so remote, it was very, very difficult to conduct large scale searches. And it wasn't until several months later that there was signs of Anne spotted. This sighting was actually reported by a different hunter, and like I said, this was several months later, and what he saw gave him the creeps. It really, really freaked him out to the point where he thought that Anne was being possessed, and it scared him so much that he refused to follow her. What he said is that he saw Anne, she was almost naked, she was barely wearing any clothes, and she was crawling up several hills on all fours. And not wanting to go near her, he kind of just took in what he was seeing and he left. He really did not want to go see what was going on with Anne, and unfortunately that was the last sighting of her, and her body was never found. In 1936, there was Bill Epier and John Mulholland. Now, again, under mysterious circumstances, their cabin was actually found burned down to the ground, and no sighting of their bodies were at the crime scene, and there was absolutely no sightings or no clues leading to what could have happened to the men, and their bodies were never found. So my question here is, what do you guys think could be causing all of these people to disappear? Are these wild animal attacks that happen to be very clean and precise? Is there something more paranormal going on? It's also important to note that there's a lot of people that have actually reported strange sightings in the sky. People have reported lots of UFO sightings up in this area. They've seen strange lights in the sky. Some planes have even gone missing in this area, almost kind of like the Bermuda Triangle. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting from this. Okay, so let's get into some of the theories behind what's going on in the Nahanni Valley. If you guys have some theories, please leave them in the comments below. I would be super intrigued to know what you guys think could be causing all of these people to go missing. So the first theory, and it seems like this could be the most plausible one, actually comes from the Naha people that actually the name references, the Valley of the Naha people. So this actually comes from the Dene population that has lived in the region for quite a long time, and they've actually passed on their stories from generation to generation. So this leads me to believe that this theory does have some merit. the story that they've passed down, and one of the biggest theories here, is that of the Naha tribe. Now, the story here behind the Naha tribe is that they were once the indigenous population that lived in the Nahanni Valley, and they were actually considered to be very, very aggressive and violent people, almost warrior-like. And one of the key traits here is that they were actually known for decapitating or taking the head of their victims. It's also said that they used to actually live in the mountains. They would hide out in different caves. They would make their homes up in the mountains, so it was less accessible to the other populations in the area. And because they were so aggressive and so violent, they would actually attack the Dene people, who were often their victims. Eventually, after so many attacks, the Dene population got really, really tired of being victimized, so they decided to plan a well thought out attack as a form of revenge on the Naha people. And so when the day finally came that they were going to put their plan into action, to their surprise, when the Dene people actually got up to the mountains where the Naha people were living, they found their village to be completely abandoned. They were no longer there, and they had absolutely no idea where they had gone or why. Now the question is, where did they go? Obviously, why would they leave their home in such a what seemed like a rush and for what seemed like no reason? Now the theory here is that the Naha people are actually still alive, and that they just chose to push themselves further out into the forest, further out into the mountains, to be a little bit more secluded. This could explain a few different theories as to why people's heads go missing, why they disappear. Maybe they don't take too kindly to foreigners invading their land, especially if they're out taking their resources. The fact that many of the victims are found without their heads is a very key trait for me personally. And this also could explain maybe potential Bigfoot sightings. If you see a person that's actually out living in the forest, that they've really secluded themselves from society and they don't necessarily know how to interact or even appear to be human-like compared to what we're used to today, it could be easy to mistake these people for Bigfoot. Now, the next theory is actually something a little bit more mythical, a little bit more cryptozoology-like, and it's actually called the Wahila. Now, this is actually an Inuit myth, and it's said that these Wahilas are actually kind of like werewolves, but more so like dire wolves. Very, very large wolf-like creatures that live in the forest and just prey on everything and anything that ventures into their territory. Now, the next one I came across is actually called the Nukluk, and I would say this is comparable to Bigfoot. It actually also comes from the Dene people, and it's a mythical creature or some sort of theory that says it's very similar to Bigfoot. It's a tall, big, hairy man. He seems to be carrying some sort of animal cloak over him, and he just walks around the area, and some people claim to see him with some sort of club, like an animal bone that he uses as a weapon. I don't know, seems a little bit very similar to Bigfoot. Maybe this is where the Bigfoot story originated from. If you guys don't know, Bigfoot itself is actually a Aboriginal tale as well. They also call it Sasquatch. So I don't know, there's a lot of similarities here. So let me know what you guys think is going on in the Nahanni Valley. There's so many interesting YouTube channels out there that talk about this area, lots of cool videos, different articles. I really wish it were a little bit more accessible so we could learn more about it. It's probably filled with a lot of things that we don't know about yet. Let me know what you guys think. Is this a missing 411 hotspot? Is there something going on that we don't fully understand? Are there a tribe of indigenous people hiding out there that attacked foreigners that come into their land? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and we will see you in the next video.